Bridgette Engeler. I teach in strategic foresight design and stuff at Swinburne. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some stuff that I do and some stuff that I don't do. So I am what's known as an academically trained or professional futurist. And this is stuff that I know about, but it's not what I'm here to talk about tonight.
We're not going to be able to hear you. You're gonna
okay, I'm going to have to... I hate this. I really hate this.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. The things I do. The problem with futures and foresight is that it is this, long on buzzwords and short on expertise. So I did a number of different things before I found my way to strategic foresight, and I do actually do what is called futures work. So I'm a foresight practitioner as well as a academic teaching in design and doing some other stuff. And the reason I'm here tonight is just to talk a little bit about what Futures and Foresight is about, but also some stuff that's been going on. So some facts. The future does not exist. You know all those people who say this is what the future is going to be? It's bullshit. The future cannot exist because it hasn't happened. Therefore, there cannot be future facts. There is always more than one future because it hasn't happened. So again, when we're told this is going to be the future of something, it's generally bullshit. Because there is no one way that we can guarantee that it will come about. There's also the issues of all of the other stuff that happens, which we'll get to. Because futures have to be created, it's up to us and our imagination to create them. And more to the point, you need radical ideas, ridiculous ideas. And this is where Jim Dator, who is a futurist, he taught at the University of Hawaii. If there's anywhere in the world you'd really like to teach, it would kind of be a good place to do it. And Hawaii has been really good with their futures and foresight work. That they sounded their klaxon a couple of years ago. Did you know that? Yeah, so the siren that they only sound when they think something might go wrong, and sure enough, they kind of called it. Most of the work that we do is grounded in the present, though, and that's a really big deal because we have this continuation of business as usual. If we have ridiculous ideas, they are the most useful because they're the things that challenge us. And the thing I look to when I think about this is sitting at the end of a hallway in the early 90s with my housemate sitting at the other end of the hallway in a different room, sending me Win pop-up messages. And me saying, this is ridiculous, why are you messaging me? And guess what? That was probably my first wake-up call around what futures and foresight and ridiculous ideas are about. So before you ask me all of the dopey things, I don't predict. It's not my job to do that. The future doesn't exist, therefore it cannot be predicted. Remember that thing I said? You can't decide that something is going to happen in a particular way because there are all of the possible interventions that happen along the way that future is caused to emerge differently or unfold in different ways. It's also not my responsibility as a professional futurist to predict. I can say that I don't know, and it is absolutely my responsibility to say I don't know because I don't. What I can do is anticipate and think about things more deeply over the longer term. So even in terms of what I did today, planning out my day, we all do this. We all think about, is the contingency? What train do I get? Or which road will I take to get home? In terms of futures and foresight, it's thinking about all of that, but over the longer term. And my frame of reference is generally 50 to 100 years, although I'm much happier working in 25 to 50. But there are people, such as the Long Now Foundation in the US, that are working on a 10,000-year clock. So there are people who think out in time. And the problem, not the problem with that, but the lovely part of that is that they're talking about stuff that hasn't happened yet, but has actually happened in galaxies far, far away. Yeah, so the stuff that, that light that hits us, it's old. It's new to us, but it's not new to the galaxy. And the problem with predictions is that they rarely actually happen. And if you think about the stuff that we were told, does anyone remember the death of print? Yep, I was working in design for a long time. I still do. Why? Anyway, we were told that print was dead. Anyone pick up something printed recently? Anyone see anything sitting around their tables? You always have to ask what it serves when someone gives you a prediction. So all of that stuff about, digital is the way to go. We're all going to be having flying cars. Bullshit. It's not just about the flying car, it's about the infrastructure around it. So when we think about all of those imagined possibilities, that's all they are. And they are often images depicted by people based on what it is that they want to serve and the images of futures that they want to hold in their heads. And if I asked you to all close your eyes now, and I'm not going to, and imagine what it would be like 5 years from now, I bet everyone's going to have a few things in common, but I also bet there's going to be a bunch of differences, which is based on where you are, what is contextually limited by us, but it's also based on our neurology. And when we are asked to think about images of futures, we tend to go to the same part of our brain that stores memories. So not only do we go in to retrieve those images, we use them to build out, which is why we extrapolate from where we are, which is why I have the continuation of business as usual. I've put up there deliberately 2 years ago because there was a shitload that happened last year, and not everything happened that was predicted, and not everything that was predicted has happened. And if you want to have a look at this in your own time, then do go back and have a look at what was predicted to happen, whether banks would collapse or not collapse, whether we would be wearing a particular thing. And we'll get to trends later. Trends they're fun, but they're my nemesis. So let's just go back a little bit. Does anyone recognise anything? I suspect that some of you weren't even born. I'm 52. I definitely was born. So 2001 was a pretty scary year. There were significant issues, but we also had Bratz dolls. Napster collapsed, which is how we got... Anyone recognise that over in the bottom corner? Yep. There was also, believe it or not, a major volcano that exploded, and we kind of forgot about that because other stuff took over. Apart from the Windows XP thing, the image I find most compelling about this is that man on the cover of Time. Does anyone know who it is? It is. So he was the man of the year. That's a better question to ask, which is often what futures and foresight work is about, asking better questions. Not what is going to happen, but what are the things that we want to happen and how we make them happen. It was Giuliani, Rudy Giuliani, yeah, sorry. So if we're thinking about going forward 20 years, because it's often easier to think about going forward when we've gone back into the past. You know, that stuff was only 20 years ago, and a lot of significant shifts and changes and improvements have happened. But in the next 20 years or so, let's be honest, we're a bit fucked, really. I'm pretty blunt about this. There are all sorts of issues that we haven't taken enough notice of. There are things that we should have taken notice of and didn't. And these are the things that we're likely to still be playing with, because these are macro trends. These are global drivers. It's not the shape of the heel on the shoes that you're buying. It's not whether something is in stock at the supermarket. It's the reason why that heel is in fashion, and it's why something isn't in stock at the supermarket. So this is the stuff that's going to be perilously close to us, even more perilously close than it is now. So my apologies to anyone who's thinking, oh, it's pretty good right now, because this is about as good as it's going to get. There is the concept of descent pathways and civilizational decline. You can ask me about that later, because it's not necessarily cheery, but it's also not completely hopeless either. And on any day of the week, I will choose hope over optimism anytime. So in terms of you and yourself, and this is the most important thing about futures, is where do you see yourself? What do you imagine around this? Because we have the opportunity to shape those futures. Everything that we do today, remember that movie, The Butterfly Effect? Yeah, I think I was about 25 when that was released. That notion of there being consequences, intended or unintended, is the key of this kind of work. That you've got to think about, where are you 20 years from now? I'm going to be 72. That's kind of weird, because that means I'm going to be closer to my mum's age than the age that I am now, which is a bit weird. I don't know what my community will be, but put it this way, I'm choosing to live inland. Someone did once ask me about property investment. I said, that's not my job, but go inland. And get solar with a battery. We've got someone trying to sell us solar at the moment, and they're saying, you don't really need a battery. I'm saying, oh, yes, we do. Oh, hell we do. We had a power outage on Monday night, and my partner looked at me and said, oh, we actually do need a battery. Yep, we do. We have rope in the car, 3 types of rope, but that's a whole other story. Because we have to think about this stuff. 3 types of rope. The one that you can use in wet weather, the one that glows if you need it to, and then the emergency one, because you always have the emergency one. Who in this room has more than 1 packet of matches at home near the torch? Thank you. I'm not alone. You've got to have a torch, and not the one on your phone, because it chews up the battery. So if the power goes out and it isn't charged, you might be a bit fucked. So we weren't good with uncertainty. And this is partly the language and the vernacular of business, that we need certainty. We need to know what is going to happen. Nonsense. It's been a horrible year. It still is. And at this point last year, I was doing a talk for a university in Adelaide, and someone said to me, what do you think about next year? And I said, well, I think 2021 is going to be a lot more like 2020 than 2019. And that made her sad. I also suspect that 2022 is going to be a lot more like 2021 than 2019. In fact, I don't think we're going to get anything near where we were in 2019. So that's the bad news, and I'm the bad news bear. I'm a dystopian futurist. I live in the bottom left corner of an integral quadrant, but that's what liberates me and allows me to give hope and do the work that I do. So a couple of things I want to talk about, because this stuff got bandied around last year. Did anyone hear that COVID-19 and pandemic was a black swan? Did anyone hear that? Oh, there's a couple of people putting their hands up. Sorry, that was bullshit too. And this is why. And a couple of these terms up here are bullshit too. Wildcards, there are 2 types. There's the stuff that we think probably won't happen, so low probability, but it could have a pretty significant impact if it happens. We then have what's known as a type 2 wildcard, which is the stuff that is highly likely and is highly destructive, but the problem is the experts don't think it's going to happen. Can anyone think of something like that? Climate change? Yep, except that can also be another category. That's a good one. Global financial crisis, anyone? Definitely. Also, the Twin Towers. Which was an awful, awful thing, but that was also, it was considered a wild card, but it had actually appeared in 6 scenarios around the world. But no one thought it was palatable. It was like, oh no, that's too hard. We don't want to deal with that. And that's the connection to climate change. That's just all too hard, particularly for non-experts. So there is actually a veritable menagerie when it comes to these things. Now, this is stolen very happily from the Post-Normal Times website, which is run by a couple of people I know, so they know I'm using this, even though it's not acknowledged at the bottom of the slide. And we're going to talk a bit about some of these things. The first thing I want to get rid of is this. This is something I came over recently. Grey swan comes from the same origins as black swan, so Nicholas Taleb. Really, it's not a thing. Again, the problem we have is that because it's seen as so unlikely, we ignore it. Which is not so good when we think about the complexity of something like pandemic. And it's like, oh, look, that would be really bad. But the more challenging part of pandemic is that it had layers of complexity that we hadn't thought about. So, toilet paper. Supply chain. Did anyone run out of medication that they needed? Because we didn't think through the consequences of stuff like this. Now, there was another little incident recently that was a bit of a wild card. Big boats, canal. Yep. Most of the focus was on, oh my goodness, we're not going to get electronic chips from one part of the world to the other. Oh my goodness, there's a whole lot of furniture to go into a flat pack manufacturer's offices. We're not going to get that either. But there were also 6 ships that had live animal cargo on them. Now, the challenge with that was not so much about the cargo, it was that that canal was built a long time ago and it was not built for the sorts of other infrastructure that we have now. So the ships we have now are bloody big. The canal was not built for those, which is why that flying car, autonomous vehicles things is so damn hard, because it's not so much the vehicles themselves, it's the supporting infrastructure that makes it hard. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the challenges of thinking through stuff. Because when it comes to the notion of a black swan or a grey rhino or black jellyfish, and you can look these up, the biggest issue we have is people ignoring stuff. So the people who should know about this and possibly do, so pandemic featured in 3 very good, credible, well-known and well-distributed scenarios, one of which was a military intelligence scenario that is publicly available. I'm happy to send anyone a link to it if they want it. And on page 73, I think it is, it details the emergence of a pandemic in Southeast Asia. This was not a scenario based on, oh, look, maybe that'll happen. This was based on the challenges that we have around us. So the global macro trends and the data that informs that work. It wasn't some bloke selling you a hot new tech tool and calling themselves a futurist, because unfortunately that's the moniker that gets worn mostly around futures and foresight. It's around technology and the next big thing. And that's actually not our job. It's not what we do. We are more interested in considering the consequences of stuff, the things that we do today that have actions that appear in the present, as well as those futures that are yet to emerge. So when people talk about the future, remember 2020. Because I remember sitting in a classroom at the end of 2019 and talking to students about this stuff and them saying, but would this really happen? I said, I can't tell you whether it will happen or not, but we need to be prepared. I was then interviewed in January about our preparedness, and I said, the thing that I don't think we're ready for is viruses. And I don't mean the IT kind. We're not equipped to deal with it. We don't have the intellectual capacity to deal with some of this stuff. So what we want to know about are alternative futures. My little bit of theory for tonight, this is the futures cone, the Joe Voros version, not the Clem Bezold version, not the Stuart Candy version, not the speculative design Dun and Raby version, or the Elliot Montgomery version for speculative design as well. This is the almost original and the one that captures it. The point being here that from wherever you stand in time, there are multiple possible futures opening up in front of you. My perspective is out from here. Your perspective is from where you are. This is not a singular view of a singular determined future. It is the possibility that expands over time. And there are lots of different kinds of futures. The problem we've had is that we've gone after the plausible ones because they're the ones that give us certainty. This is what we need to be ready for. More of this banny stuff, which is Jaime Cassio's phrase, as opposed to VUCA. We want to avoid business as usual. We want to stop doing the stuff we've been doing and focus on the stuff that we can do as futures emerge. And we want to be able to shape those futures through the decisions that we make, that we can be responsible for. So there's agency and accountability as part of this as well. The stuff that we use every day has a legacy, and we want it to be better, really, than it is. And this is where trends get difficult. Because trends are current and we all focus on them, but they're grounded in the present and there's no guarantee that those trends will continue, no matter what the modelling says. And I just want to remind you, 2020. The modelling didn't have 2020 in there. The modelling didn't have global financial crisis. The modelling has, however, had climate change in it. We've just ignored it. There's always a Gibson quote, and this is one of my preferred ones, and that's where I'm going to end tonight. So thank you.
It's on? Hello, hello. Great. Okay, I think Bridgette and I certainly see eye to eye in our dystopian view of the future. If anyone was here for my Node Night talk at the beginning of last year, where I presented apocalyptic scenarios, I think that you would agree with that. But are there any questions from the audience for Bridgette? Yes, please.
Bryn. Yeah. Okay, so VUCA is the term that was coined by US military. You know, they're good at that stuff. Internet, World Wide Web, VUCA. Banny was conceived by futurist Jaume Cascio early last year, but he'd been talking about it the year before that as well, as we all had. And instead of saying that it's about volatility, uncertainty, we've kind of gone beyond that. It's actually acknowledging the degree of complexity around us and thinking about anticipation and the incomprehensibility of stuff, and knowing that there's only so much stuff that we're going to know. This is related to not just the unknown unknowns, but the sense that we can't know everything. Not only do we not have the intellectual capacity, but how do we know about stuff that hasn't happened yet? So Banny captures the incomprehensible, and the fact that this whole non-linear thing is something we need to get used to, particularly in Western culture, where everything is depicted from one side to the other with a sequence of getting to the end. There's a lot of deep work that's being done around non-linearity and the sense that time actually moves not in cycles but in parallel. This happens in space, and don't start me on that because that's not my area of expertise. But I am aware that the way time works in different areas and in different contexts with different constraints means that non-linear is a better way to... time is really only something that came out of the Industrial Revolution and clocking on and clocking off. Once we started to measure time. No, seriously. That was when it happened. So we're interested in the time to wake up and go to bed, but yeah, it's an Industrial Revolution construct.
Are there any other questions for Bridgette? Yes.
I have the matches. I have a torch.
Yep.
An actual torch. Outside of matches and outside of critical thinking, what hope do we have?
The only hope from inside yourselves. So we're the people that are going to make the difference, so it's up to us to do it. We can't rely on others, and this is all sounding really glib, I know, but the more prepared we are, the more able we are to take on stuff. The quote that I love to use, which is not mine originally, is, you know when you're on a plane, remember those planes? When the flight attendant does the toilets down here, no smoking thing, and she said oxygen masks, fit yours first, then help others. So if we are equipped to do stuff, then we will be able to help others. So yeah, have the torch, have the matches. Don't worry about being able to make sourdough. Figure out how you can grow plants. Figure out how you can mend stuff. Around Y2K, one of the biggest issues that people were thinking about was whether it was real or not. Yes, it was, because we averted it. But it was more around if power went out, for example. So I had cash, because if the power went down because energy providers had no way of keeping it up, then I would not be able to go and get cash for an ATM. So think about the consequences and then do what you need to do. Does that kind of answer your question? Yeah, but that's the thing, we should be terrified. And I use a collective we, and it's kind of wrong, but we need to acknowledge our complicity in this, both in our material consumption, but also the way we approach stuff, and the way we think about things. We need to face up to the horror. Sorry.
Be afraid, luck favors the prepared. I think we've got time maybe for one more question. Yes, over here.
What role does history and the past play in future work? Do you use historical data to analyze?
Yes and no. A lot of the work that we do when we create stuff is grounded in recent historical data, which is why trends are so bad. Because we look at what was... If we bothered to learn from history, we might not repeat it. Again, I don't mean to sound glib, but we keep going over same old ground, which is partly down to us as people and civilization, but we could learn from the Etruscans. So when I said before about civilizational decline, hello Etruscans, goodbye Etruscans, hello Romans. So we have to look to the past, and I'm talking about big history, not just the last few thousand years of what would be considered human civilization. We also need to acknowledge other life forms, so sentient and non-sentient life forms, organic and non-organic life forms. And so they make up that collective piece. But yeah, the history is critical, but we need to learn from it. And we just don't, which makes me sad.
Thank you so much, Bridgette. I think we all enjoyed Dystopia for the second time.